Imagine a young dreamer, a son loved by his father but surrounded by jealousy and envy on the part of his brothers. Now imagine that same young man being sold into slavery and taken to Egypt, far from everything and everyone he loved. But this is just a small part of the incredible journey of Joseph, the man who went through so many ups and downs, but always kept his faith and trust in God. Get ready to hear one of the most inspiring stories found in the Bible. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos like this one. Prepared? So let's go. At the beginning of Genesis 37, we meet Joseph as a young man of 17, tending the flocks of his father, Jacob. However, to fully understand Joseph's life, we need to go back in time a little further and explore his family and roots. Born into a lineage of generations blessed by God, Joseph had the legendary Abraham as his great-grandfather. His grandfather was the patriarch Isaac and his father was the cunning Jacob. Joseph's family is fundamental to understanding the person he would become. Jacob, in particular, had a troubled childhood, full of rivalries and cheating, but he was also marked by divine blessing and faithfulness to God. With a family so rich in history and influences, one would expect that Joseph would also have a strong personality and an amazing life. His father, Jacob, had a character that was revealed from his birth, when he grabbed the heel of his twin brother, Esau, and was given a name meaning deceiver or chipper. Jacob was skilled at manipulating people and events to his advantage, as when he tricked his father Isaac into receiving the blessing that should have belonged to Esau. Esau swore to kill Jacob, so his mother Rebekah sent him to live with his uncle Laban. There, Jacob met and fell in love with Rachel, Laban's youngest daughter. He worked 7 years for Laban in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage, but was eventually deceived by Laban, who placed his eldest daughter, Leah, in the bridal chamber. However, so in love with Rachel, Jacob agreed to work another 7 years to marry her. Joseph's story begins with the growth of Jacob's family, with the birth of his 12 children, 11 men, and 1 woman, Dinah. Leah and Rachel gave birth to their children, with the help of their respective handmaids, Zilpah and Bilhah. Joseph, the last-born, had a childhood during which his family experienced events recorded in Genesis 31 to 36, during which he was present. Although his presence is rarely mentioned during this period, he was shaped by God for a special purpose. Of all 12 sons of Jacob, until then Joseph was the youngest. The biblical text reports that Joseph was, in fact, Jacob's favorite son, to the point of presenting him with a beautiful tunic. His brothers didn't like them, because they saw that their father had him as a favorite and treated him differently. God granted Joseph the ability to have prophetic dreams, which revealed a distant future. The young man told his brothers and his father the dreams in which he ruled over them all. For everyone, this was an affront. How could such a young child be bigger than the others? How would a young man rule over his parents? Everything was a mystery, which left Jacob himself thinking about it. Carrying with him the disaffection of the various brothers, Joseph was in danger. Once, his brothers were working in the field and their father, Jacob, asked him to go and see how they were doing. Having been spotted on the way, his brothers planned to kill him, mocking his visions. The only brother who still cared about him was Reuben, who advised the brothers not to kill him, but to just throw him into a well. So they did. They waited for him to arrive, they grabbed him and tore off the beautiful tunic that his father had given him, then they threw him into an empty well. Joseph stayed at the well for some time, as his brothers sat down to eat. When the group saw a caravan of Ishmaelites, Judah thought it would be better to sell his brother than kill him, as that way they would still earn money off him. And so they sold their brother to the Ishmaelites, who in turn sold Joseph to Potiphar, the official of Pharaoh of Egypt and captain of the guard. Reuben, who saved Joseph's life, was away from the group when they sold their little brother. When he went back to the well to rescue him, he saw that he came back too late and he was no longer there. He was deeply sorry. The brothers still made a big excuse, took Joseph's tunic, stained it with animal blood, and returned it to Jacob. When the father saw that it was the tunic of his beloved son Joseph, he mourned him so deeply that no one could comfort him. After Potiphar bought Joseph, he soon put him to work in the house. Everything that Joseph did prospered, so that he went to live in Potiphar's house, where the official gave him the administration of the whole house and still later gave him the administration of all his land. As Joseph was blessed by God, and was handsome and good-looking, over time Potiphar's wife found herself attracted to the young man. One day, she invited him to lie down with her, but Joseph replied, "My master cares nothing for his household, and all that he has left in my care. No one in this house is above me. He has denied me nothing, except you, because you are his wife. How could I then do something so wicked and sin against God?" Genesis August 9, 39. And although the girl sought him out and insisted on this sin, Joseph still refused and avoided the woman wherever he went. One day, seeing that no other servant besides Joseph was at home, Potiphar's wife advanced on Joseph, grabbed him, and insisted once again that they stay together. At that moment, Joseph escapes from the woman and runs away from home, leaving his cloak behind. The woman then takes the mantle and tells the servants and her husband that Joseph had harassed her. After that, Potiphar had the young man arrested. In jail, however, God continued to bless Joseph, granting him the jailer's sympathy. This jailer, seeing that Joseph was special, gave him the position of chief of prisoners, being responsible for everything that happened there. Joseph interprets the dreams of two prisoners. While Joseph was still imprisoned, two new prisoners were sent there by the Pharaoh himself. They were chief cupbearers and chief bakers. The two new prisoners had mysterious dreams, which they could not understand. Joseph, seeing this situation, told them to tell the dreams. Joseph listened to them and gave them the interpretation of each dream, showing that the chief cupbearer would return to his position of honor, besides the king. On the other hand, it foreshadowed that the chief baker would be hanged from a tree. The only thing Joseph asked in favor of the chief cupbearer was to remember him and defend him before Pharaoh, since he was innocent. In addition to being taken by force to Egypt, he was also falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. And despite this request, the chief cupbearer forgot about Joseph. Joseph meets Pharaoh. Later on, Pharaoh began to have strange dreams. He called all the magicians and sages of Egypt, but no one could tell him what his dreams meant. It was at that moment that the chief of the cupbearers remembered Joseph, who was called in the presence of Pharaoh. Joseph soon got ready to see the king of Egypt and hear his dreams. After telling him his dream, Pharaoh was amazed at the ability of Joseph, who gave an exact interpretation of his dreams. It turns out that Egypt would go through a great period of famine, that's what the dreams said. Joseph advised Pharaoh to elect a governor, someone who would be able to coordinate and oversee the production of the land so that Egypt would have a large supply so that they would not starve in the future. Faced with such good advice and seeing that the Lord was with Joseph, Pharaoh placed him in that suggested position of power. He became the governor of Egypt, the most powerful man in that place, second only to the Pharaoh himself. His life changed completely from that moment on. He began to live in luxury, wearing fine linen, a chain, and the Pharaoh's seal ring. He also received from the king a woman, the priest's daughter. Joseph meets his brothers. Faced with the famine predicted by Joseph, Jacob sent 10 of his children down to Egypt to buy wheat to survive. Benjamin, however, stayed with his father. When Jacob's sons arrived in Egypt, Joseph found them. The new governor recognized them, but the brothers did not recognize Joseph. In this way, Joseph manipulated them, so they went to get Benjamin so that one of them would get out of jail. On the way back to Canaan, Joseph ordered the donkeys to be filled with wheat and returned the silver they used to pay. In the face of this, the brothers thought they would be accused, again, of causing trouble to Egypt. So they returned to Egypt with Benjamin, gifts, all the silver they received back, and twice as much, in fear of Joseph. But when they arrived in Egypt again, they were very well received, receiving a big lunch at Joseph's house. This one, in turn, was very emotional to find his younger brother, Benjamin, and had to leave where they were to cry. Until then, none of the brothers recognized Joseph. The truth is revealed. After yet another trick to deceive his brothers, making them promise Benjamin as a slave, Joseph reveals the truth to his brothers. They were stunned by this news, and by what God had done throughout Joseph's life. Thus, Joseph instructs Jacob to live in Egypt, where there is no famine. Pharaoh himself intervenes in Joseph's action, helping them to migrate from Canaan to Egypt. Carriages, supplies, and land to settle were provided. Jacob heard the whole story and his spirit was refreshed. When Jacob arrives in Egypt, Joseph runs towards him, hugs him, and cries with joy. Jacob also rejoices greatly, to the point of saying that he could die in peace. Jacob was taken to meet Pharaoh and then given the best land in Egypt. Famine spread strongly and Joseph was shrewd in the administration of Egypt. He sold the stored wheat in exchange for all the silver, all the cattle, all the land, and all the people, making Pharaoh even more powerful than he already was. Time passed, and Jacob was about to die. He blessed all his children and was buried. Finally, Joseph died at the age of 110. From a dreamy boy, thrown into a grave, sold as a slave, and imprisoned, until he became governor of the greatest nation of the time. Joseph's story is so important not only because of the beautiful trajectory, but because it teaches us that God is sovereign and is in control of everything. The hero in this story is not Joseph, but God himself. Did you like the story of Joseph? Comment down here. God bless you.